This is Lindsay O'Donnell Welch with Decipher, and I'm here today with Chris Langford. Chris is the Director of Network, Infrastructure, and Cybersecurity with the Louisville Independent School District. Chris, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so the education sector is a really unique part of the cybersecurity landscape, and I want to talk about your current role at Louisville ISD. But first, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your own career and background, and specifically, I'm wondering how you got into cybersecurity in the first place.
Yeah, so that's kind of I didn't take a direct route to get into cybersecurity. I started out my professional career actually as a teacher. I was the Cisco Networking Academy instructor for a local school district here in North Texas for 9 years straight out of college. Loved that, loved teaching. Um, but as a part of that, I was able to attain some Cisco certifications. And so after 9 years of teaching, I decided to go into more of a traditional IT role. So I left teaching and became a network engineer for a local municipality here in North Texas. Did that for a while, and that was kind of my first exposure to cybersecurity, I guess, because we were responsible. The network engineers were responsible for the firewalls, the content filtering systems, email security at the city. So that was kind of my first exposure to cybersecurity as a network engineer, and then from there, I went back to the district that I was working at as a teacher, but this time as the wide area network manager. And so my team was responsible for everything related to cybersecurity at the school district, and I was ultimately responsible for that. So I just kind of grew in my role in regards to cybersecurity. And then from there, I went to Louisville ISD, where I am now, where I am primarily responsible for cybersecurity, and my team is responsible for everything regarding cybersecurity here at Louisville ISD. And Louisville is a much larger district than the district that I was at before. We have about 49,000 kids and about 6,500 staff, so a very large organization. And so, yeah, so I've kind of just grown into my role in cybersecurity. I didn't plan to go into cybersecurity. It just kind of happened as I took on more and more responsibility in my various roles. And in 2017, as part of getting the job here at Louisville ISD, I got my CISSP certification. So that was kind of the next step, I guess, in that. So yeah, so I've done a lot of traditional networking infrastructure type stuff, but then also a lot of cybersecurity.
That's really interesting. I was going to ask you if you came more from the education side or the IT side, and it seems like it's important to have that background really in the education space beyond just having kind of the IT expertise, because you really can understand how school districts actually operate and kind of what the
Mhm.
challenges are there too. Is that what you've found?
Yeah, 100%. So the school districts are a completely different world, especially from the corporate environment. And then also being a teacher, I understand the effects that IT changes can have in the classroom. And so anytime we as an IT department and my team specifically are talking about making some change that's going to affect teachers and kids, we always look at it from this perspective of how is this going to affect the classroom? How is this going to affect the learning environment? Which most IT professionals don't have to think about. So yeah, so it definitely helps to have a background in education when you're working in IT for a school district or some other education entity. So yeah, I mean, that was huge for me getting that 9 years in the classroom because it's really affected the way I view things in my roles since then, and how what we do can negatively affect kids and teachers if we don't think it through properly.
Yeah, that kind of on the ground perspective is so important to have. So that's a really good point. Now, can you tell me a little bit about the unique security challenges that the education sector faces? And this kind of wraps ties into what you were just saying about classrooms, and I'm sure you have that perspective from being a teacher as well, like seeing kind of what that impact could have on the classroom. So I'm curious what you think of that.
Yeah, so education is unique in that. at least if you're thinking about it from a corporate environment, most of the time, I would say your users are not trying to circumvent all the controls that you have in place to get around them. And we're one to one in LISD for 4th through 12th grade. So we have basically 40,000 devices that go home with kids every day. And a lot of those kids have nothing better to do than try to get around the security controls that we have in place so they can get access to websites or games that we don't allow them to have access to. And so we are constantly dealing with our own user base trying to get around the controls that we have in place. Um, so that is an interesting and unique challenge that I think is just kind of unique to education. Um, and then we also have a lot of um, data that most other organizations don't have. I mean, we have 49,000 kids, so we have a ton of information on students. And so having to protect that information, that is priority number one for us, is making sure that staff and student information is secure, because we have a lot of information about students and their families. And so making sure that information is secure is our priority number one. That's a little different than what most organizations have to deal with, I think.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting too. When you look at you mentioned you have tens of thousands of students, you've got employees, and the students' ages are ranging from like elementary all the way up to high school. When you
Mm-hmm.
look at that data, like what processes and types of data are at risk, and what are some of the core and critical IT systems specifically that need to be secured when you're thinking about privacy and data security compliance?
Yeah, so we do have a lot of information on students and their families. Fortunately, we don't have any type of social security numbers, so that's good. We don't get any of that information when it comes to students, but we do have a lot of other, personal information that's stored in our student information systems. And then we also, in addition to all the student information, we have, everything that a normal business has. We have all our payroll systems, all of our ERP systems, just everything that we need to conduct business, purchasing systems, all those types of things. So all we have to secure not only the student information and family information, but everything that a normal business has. We also have to conduct business as a school district, and so we have to protect all of those systems as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, can you tell me about your experience first starting at Louisville ISD? What were some of the when you came in? Kind of what did you pinpoint as measures that needed to be implemented to improve the district's cybersecurity posture and maturity level as a whole? Like, what was that process like?
Yeah, so I started with Louisville ISD in 2016, so going on 8 years ago, and my when I started, I was the first person in the district that had cybersecurity in their title, or kind of the main focus was, or one of the main focuses of the job was cybersecurity. And so I was brought in specifically to try to, that was one of the objectives, was to try to improve the cybersecurity posture of the district. And so one of the first things that we did was we focused on our users, because we do have 6,500 staff, and we know that your users are your first and sometimes your last line of defense in cybersecurity. And so we focused on training and testing of our users. That was the first thing that we did. We brought in an outside company to do some phishing tests for us to start out, to establish a baseline of what our fish prone percentage of users was, what our risk was there. Shared that information with staff. And we did it in kind of a creative way. We do principal meetings periodically. We bring in all the principals from all the 70 campuses. And so we had the CTO of the organization that we used to do the testing come in, and we just said he was going to do a presentation about cybersecurity. And he starts talking about phishing emails, and all the phishing email examples that he's giving are the emails that were sent out to our users as the first phishing test. And so you could see the light bulbs going on as all these principals were realizing, I've gotten this email. And that was when he said, yeah, all of you should have gotten this email. And so many percentage of you clicked on this email. And it was a very large percentage at that time. So yeah, so we started there, and that kind of hit home with the principals, and then from there was able to trickle out to the staff at the campuses. And so we've been doing simulated phishing tests at least monthly for all of our users. We do annual training for all of our users. And we do periodic training on top of that annual training for users as well. So that was kind of the first area, was securing the users and trying to build up that cybersecurity culture. So that's where we started. And then from there, on the more the technical side of things, in conjunction with that, we started implementing a lot of the free services from CISA, specifically the vulnerability scanning that they do, and the web application scanning. So we started implementing services like that from CISA to reduce our threat surface on our exterior, first of all, our external facing assets. And so we were able to remediate all of our critical high level vulnerabilities, and then from there go down to all the mediums and the lows, to where now we don't have any external facing vulnerabilities according to that CISA testing that we do every month. So it was kind of a multi-prong process, I guess, or multi-step process of focusing on the users, focusing on our external facing assets, and then moving on to all of our internal and trying to remediate all the vulnerabilities that we have there. At the same time, we also implemented a ton of cybersecurity tools and services. I went back and looked at I keep a list of everything that we've done since I've been here, and there have been 28 different tools or services that we've implemented since I started here in 2016. And all of those with doing the remediation of the vulnerabilities and the training up of staff and building up that cybersecurity culture have really improved our posture a lot over the last few years.
That's awesome. Yeah, when you're looking at all the different things that you've implemented, whether it is like, those tools, or it's the kind of phishing tests and the, building that user awareness, how have you been able to kind of measure success? Like, at what point do you take a step back and say, I've, have been successful in kind of keeping threats at bay and trying to build that security culture at this organization?
Yeah, so we, as part of our users, we receive monthly phishing reports. And so over time, we're able to go back, and through the service that we have, we can go back and we can see all the way from the first test what our phish prone percentage was, and then what it's been every month since then, since that 2016 timeframe. So that's the way we measure our user successes. Is that phish prone percentage going down? Is it under the industry average every month? That's really our goal, is to be under the K-12 industry average with the organization that we're a part of. And so, yeah, that's how we train. That's how we track the user side of things. And then on the more technical side of things, we can look at the number of vulnerabilities that we've been able to remediate, and we can see that we have no external facing vulnerabilities, at least according to CISA. We also have the internal vulnerability scanner that's scanning all of our internal and external facing assets, and we can see how many of those we've been able to remediate. We can see how many are actually potentially exploitable and could really affect us. So we can just do kind of a quantitative measure of that. But then we also subscribe to a cybersecurity rating service, and we've done that for the last few years, that tracks us, what they can see of our organization from the outside looking in, pulling stuff from the dark web and all those types of things, and then also doing the assessments on our exterior perimeter there. And so that cybersecurity rating service also has helped us, because we can show where our score was when we started a few years ago versus where it is now, and the improvement that we've had. And so that's a quantitative way that we can see how much we've been able to improve our posture over the last few years.
Nice. Yeah, it's really cool to hear that you're, leveraging CISA's resources that they've,
Mm-hmm.
made public over the years and kind of promoted. And it's really interesting to see how that has played out in this use case to be able to help you guys there. Um, what when you look at all the different measures that you've kind of implemented over the years, was there one that has really helped kind of bring things together from a cybersecurity perspective, like one that you consider the most important?
Yeah, there's a couple. The user training obviously is probably the most important thing that we've done. We have a saying here that a paranoid user is a good user when it comes to cybersecurity. So we want our users questioning the emails that they receive and not just clicking on everything or replying to everything. It's gotten to the point where if we're going to do a specific technology initiative, we generally have to send out an email before the actual email goes out. So we have an actual technology excuse me notice form that we use to send out emails, and so we have to send out an email through that letting them know, hey, tomorrow. And we're in the process of rolling out Duo for MFA. We're moving from Microsoft for MFA to Duo, and so as a part of that process we have to send out an email to all of our users that are going to be at a campus that's going to be getting it uh, the day before, letting them know, hey, tomorrow you're going to be getting the actual enrollment email. It is a legitimate email. You can click on it and go through the enrollment process. Because if we don't, at least half of the users are either going to ignore, delete, or report the email as malicious. So that's which is a good thing. We're glad we've gotten to that point. So yeah, so the user side of things, that's very important. Obviously, some of the tools that we've implemented a few years ago, we implemented a lot of the tools within the Cisco security stack, and those have really helped us. Specifically, Umbrella. My team absolutely loves Umbrella. It's a great tool. It's really helped. We have a content filtering system, but it's more of a education focused content filtering system. It does block malicious threats and things of that nature, but it's not as security focused as Umbrella is. And so having Umbrella as that second layer to help filter what staff and students are trying to access, that's been huge for us. And then the third, I would say, is a tool that we implemented a couple of years ago within our email system. So we have Cisco Secure Email and we have Office 365. We have all the security that's built into those two platforms. But no platform is 100%, especially when it comes to email. And so a couple of years ago, we implemented an AI-based email tool that sits behind those two tools and looks at emails as soon as they hit a user's inbox, and within 2 seconds the AI determines, is it legitimate, is it spam, is it malicious, something like phishing or some other type of social engineering. And if it is spam or malicious, it pulls that email out of the user's inbox and the email just goes away and the user never even sees it or has a chance to interact with it. And so that has been huge for us because that has cut down on literally 99% of all the malicious or spam emails that users were getting. They just go away now. Stuff that was making it through either the Cisco or the Microsoft filters. So those three tools have been, or those three items have been the biggest things that we've done, I think.
That's great. Yeah. Now, when we think about security, when we think about culture and security,
Mm-hmm.
you're in a bit of a unique place because you have both students and employees. Can you talk a little bit about the significance of building a security-minded culture um, at your organization, and how do you specifically do this at a district-wide level?
Yeah. So that for staff, it's the process that we started um, a few years ago with the training that we do every year and the phishing tests that we do every month. But then also we send out emails every month in October for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So we send those out to staff. So we've been doing that for so long that any staff member that's been here for a while and we also send out an email through the service that we have to do our phishing testing and training. They send out an email every week with what they're seeing as maybe a prominent phishing email that their users are receiving, things of that nature. So we do a lot of things to try to engage staff and educate them on, hey, this is the latest type of phishing threat that is out there in the wild, while also doing the testing and the training and then the emails that come every October. So we try to do a lot to build up staff and help them understand the need to be suspicious of what they receive. But then for students, we've also done LISD has a digital citizenship curriculum that starts in fourth grade for all students, and they receive digital citizenship training um, every year all the way through 12th grade. And they talk about things like what's in our AUP, and when you sign that, what does that mean? Our acceptable use policy, what's a digital footprint and why is it important to maintain that? Account safety, things like multi-factor authentication, what's online tracking and privacy, why do you have to worry about that? Digital etiquette, so how to behave on social media and online, and then just general ideas within cybersecurity, stuff about social engineering and phishing, malicious emails, threats, ransomware. They go through all that kind of stuff to try to educate our students as well. And so they get some of that every year from fourth grade to 12th grade to try to build up their digital citizenship, as we call it, but a lot of different things regarding cybersecurity in that area as well.
That's really cool. I feel like when I went to school, we didn't have anything like that. And granted, we were
Yeah.
in a different time with, where computers were back then versus now. But like being able to have, um, better educate kind of the upcoming students so that they can be better equipped to deal with that, both in a school setting, but once they go into the workforce and things like that, that's
Mm-hmm.
really important to do at such a young age. So that's a really cool program.
Yeah, it's great. It's something we started a few years ago in the learning and teaching department here at LISD. They're awesome, and yeah, very happy that they're doing that. And I wish I would have had that when I was going to school as well. So
Yeah, yeah, same. Um, okay, so when we're thinking about security threats, what are some of the top security threats that keep you up at night?
yeah, so I mean, ransomware used to be my default answer. Um, and ransomware obviously is still a huge concern for every organization, but for me, it's kind of shifted from ransomware to more of a data exfiltration and extortion is probably the thing that keeps me up at night the most, because a lot of threat actors have gone from just regular ransomware because they know a lot of people have backups that are offline and they can just use those, to now they're extorting the data or exfiltrating the data and then extorting organizations in order to get money. So that's probably my number one concern, is that a malicious email is going to make it through and a threat actor is going to gain access and extort and be able to exfiltrate and extort. Um, so yeah, that's probably the thing that keeps me up late at night
Yeah,
mostly.
right.
So, but then also just yeah, the idea that someone would gain access to all the student information that we have. I mean, that's a big deal. So that obviously is our number one concern, is keeping student and family information safe. And so yeah, that's another large fear that I have, is just making sure that that information is protected. And then it doesn't necessarily keep me up at night, but we do, trying to make sure that kids are protected from themselves, because a
Mhm.
lot of because like I said, the kids are always trying to get around our filters, and so trying to keep those up to date as possible, make sure that they can't circumvent the tools that we have in place, to kind of help protect them from themselves, I think is something else that we kind of focus on and is a big concern for us.
Yeah, yeah, that's something you mentioned as a unique challenge, and it's definitely must be difficult to kind of deal with that and not just say you can't do this, but here's why, especially for kind of younger kids who might not have that understanding yet. So,
Yeah,
uh, yeah.
yeah, that. And one thing that I forgot to mention earlier, a unique challenge in education, is we also have students that will pay for DDoS attacks if they have a test that they don't want to take. So they will go out and pay $50 for a DDoS attack so that they don't have to take some online test. We had that was a pretty frequent occurrence for us in the past, and so we got DDoS protection through our ISP, so that's not a concern anymore. So now we get a report when a student tries that, and we just know they're throwing their money away, which is great. It doesn't happen very much anymore, but that was something. I mean, and I feel like that's probably not something that happens in the corporate world, where you have to worry about your users paying for a DDoS attack against their own corporate network, but that is something that happens in education a lot.
Wow, that's something I never would have thought of, but it kind of makes sense when you think of if a kid really doesn't want to take a test, they're,
Yep.
thinking, how can I do this? And maybe not thinking through it, but
Yeah.
that's really interesting. Um, all right. Well, I wanted to ask, also when in your role, what inspires you? Like why do you love working in the education space, especially for cybersecurity?
Yeah, so I've worked in public sector basically my entire professional career. I've never worked for, a company or a giant corporation or anything like that. And so I like the idea of working for a company where I'm not, or working for an organization, I guess I should say, a district where I'm not uh, just making money for some corporation or getting, making it where some CEO gets a massive bonus at the end of the year or something like that. Like my job is helping to protect staff and students. That's what I get to do every day. And so, uh, yeah, that's awesome. That's so much better than just being motivated by, well, we have to sell this many widgets or meet this quota or whatever the case might be. But knowing that what I do enables staff to be able to focus on teaching, to educate the next generation, like that's awesome. And so that's what inspires me, and that's why I went into education to begin with, was to be able to help young people, gain knowledge, like I said, I was the teacher for 9 years for the Cisco Networking Academy. And so being able to help them gain knowledge. And I've had many students that I've connected with over the years that are in the IT field. They're either, doing networking or server administration, or they're in cybersecurity. And it all started with me teaching them, years ago. And so while I'm not in the classroom anymore, I get to facilitate those types of situations now by protecting staff and students and enabling them to focus on the education process. And so that's what inspires me and why I do what I do.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I'm sure being in that kind of teaching experience position, like you do, you really understand why it is so important to have the role that you're in right now. And
Mhm.
I'm curious too. When you are talking to students, like, do you see you know, potentially a large level of interest from students in cybersecurity and or tech? Like, do you think that's something that students are just interested in?
Yeah, definitely. We have two different career centers within LISD, and one of the career centers has a networking and cybersecurity focused area. And so every year, the cybersecurity and networking students come over and tour our data center and talk to our network engineers about what they do every day, how they do what they do, the kind of experience, training, certifications, education they have to be able to do the jobs that they do. And yeah, so every year we have between 25 and 30 kids that come over from that program to tour our facility, see our data center, all that kind of stuff. And we also we participate, LISD does a career out day every year, where students that are juniors or seniors can go to an organization in a career field that they're interested in and spend 3 hours there learning about how um, to do those jobs and what all goes into it. And so we participate in that every year. And we have, for my area, every year we have between 4 and 8 kids that come over and get to do the same kind of things like the class does on their field trip as well. So yeah, there's definitely an interest in that. And the cybersecurity and networking program has grown every year since they started it a few years ago here at LISD. And so yeah, there's definitely interest from students, and there's some really smart kids in those programs, and they're getting exposed to things that I wasn't exposed to until multiple years into my career, and they're learning about a lot of things that's really going to help them. And it's great to be able to answer their questions and kind of help them along that path to be able to become a professional in the IT industry.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I love to hear that. Okay, so final question here is what top security advice do you have for security professionals, especially those in the education sector?
Yeah. So one would be your users. Like I said earlier, they're your first and in many cases last line of defense. So securing your users is probably the top priority. Building a culture of cybersecurity, having paranoid users that don't just click on everything that they receive. Um, so that's priority number one in my mind, because all it takes is one malicious email and it could sink the entire ship. Um, and then outside of that, more on the technical side of things, we don't put all our eggs in any one basket. We have multiple tools, a very layered approach. Like I said earlier, we've implemented 28 different tools and services over the last few years. So we're not depending on any single tool to be a silver bullet for us, but we take a multi-layered approach for everything. So having that layered approach when it comes to cybersecurity, multiple tools, even some tools that might be doing similar or the same types of things, but they maybe do them a little differently. So not putting your eggs in one basket, but having a multi-layered approach to securing your environment is great. And then specifically for education sector, if you're not taking advantage of the free tools that are offered by CISA, I would highly recommend you do that, from the vulnerability scanning, the web application scanning, the pen tests that they'll give you for free every year, the cybersecurity assessments that they'll do for you, and then the low cost services that they have, like they have EDR service that you can get very cheaply through CISA. So a lot of different services that they offer. If you're not taking advantage of those, that's a great place to start. And then there's other organizations like MSISAC. If you're not a member of MSISAC in the education sector, join MSISAC. That way you get the emails whenever there's some type of new vulnerability or emerging threat or something that is actively being exploited that you need to know about, so that you can remediate or threat hunt in your environment or whatever you need to do to respond to that. So yeah, join those organizations, and they're all. I mean, it's free. It's free for public sector. So taking advantage of the CISA and the MSISAC services, that's huge. And then there's a lot of state organizations, like here in Texas. TEA, the Texas Education Agency, and the Department of Information Resources offers a lot of free services for school districts. Like there's free, especially for smaller districts, free EDR, free cybersecurity assessments, other services that they offer, and many states offer those for K-12. So if you're not taking advantage of those free services that states offer, that's another great avenue for education as well.
Awesome. Chris, thank you so much for coming on today, talking about your experiences and your advice in the cybersecurity landscape. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks.